Hello and welcome to another edition of England Cricket on 99.94 with me, Daniel Norcross, TMS commentator, broadcaster, occasional scribbler, and the whiff-waff, the big boy, the man at PA who tells you everything you need to know about cricket with a chuckle in his voice, but a kind of acerbic miserableism to go with it. It's Rory Dollard. Welcome back, Rory.
Thank you. I've given you the chuckle there already, but the miserableism is yet to come.
I think there's going to be plenty of chance for it to happen because today we are, unsurprisingly, going to look back on what was an epic test match. I don't know if you can have an epic test match that contained the third shortest number of balls that an England side has faced at home in its history, exceeded only by the 1888 Lord's Test, which I didn't attend, contrary to rumour, between England and Australia, and the 1995 England-West Indies match at Edgbaston, which was played out on an absolute terror track. Lord's was not a terror track, but England managed to survive just 82.4 six-ball overs. It was the 8th shortest test match played on English soil in its entire history, and it resulted in a massive win for South Africa. So today we are going to look at three specific areas of that game, starting with South Africa's performance, how they steamrolled England, Stokes' captaincy, which had some intriguing aspects, it has to be said, and many a talking point, and what, if anything, will change with the upcoming second test match taking place at Old Trafford later this week, starting on Thursday. So to kick off, those are the raw bits of data, Rory. How on earth did South Africa do that? It was a wonderful bowling performance. But to bowl out England twice in 82.4 overs, is that English failings? Was it South African genius? Combination of the both? Was the wicket a terror track? What did you make of it?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying England are living up to their promises. They told us they were going to come off the rails. They insisted, in fact. They left absolutely no room for doubt that it was going to go wrong. They were quite enthusiastic about the fact that it was heading for the wall at some point, and we reached it the first time of asking against South Africa. So they were clearly a step up on the opposition that we've had over here in England so far. Not in terms of pedigree, because that New Zealand team, that India team, the attack certainly are excellent, elite teams, but they were both, for various reasons, not quite at their best. And this South Africa team turned up and they gave a super account of themselves and actually really played up to their ceiling, really, in terms of what they could expect to do in the first test of a series overseas.
Kagiso Rabada was man of the match, player of the match, I should say. Arguably, Anrich Nortje's 6 wickets and when they happened and how they happened, you could argue were just as, if not more important, supplemented by Lungi Ngidi, who in the second innings sort of dusted off the rustiness of the first innings, which he only bowled 5 or 6 overs. And then Marco Jansen. I mean, he's the fourth seamer. He swung the ball a mile. The over that he bowled, if you can call it that, to James Anderson, I mean, Graham Pollock would have struggled to get an edge on some of those deliveries. The ball was swinging an absolute mile. The last wicket was sort of emblematic, it seemed to me, of the complete control that South Africa had when their 4th seamer comes on, starts a ball at leg stump, it swings past the flailing outside edge of Jimmy Anderson's bat. It's interesting when he plays that drive, incidentally, that he plays a horizontal bat shot, but he actually turns back 90 degrees, so he's only playing it with his outside edge, which gives him even less chance of hitting it. And then it just clipped the leg stump, pretty much a mirror image of the ball that actually did for Joe Root, only this time to the left-hander. So we got to see what it looks like to clip the leg stump rather than look at the Hawkeye image. And it was just, you were scratching your head to think, is any base uncovered here? And I haven't even mentioned Keshav Maharaj, who picked up those 2 crucial wickets before lunch, bowled very tightly, allowed Elgar to rotate his 4-seamers as if he really needed to, because they only bowled for 36 overs. They hardly needed any rest.
It kind of struck me that there must have been
perfect all-round attack.
Absolutely, and there must have been directors of cricket and chief execs at county cricket clubs up and down the country cursing Brexit, because in any other tour of recent vintage, they'd have been whipping out the Colpack contracts. Marco Jansen would be on a 4-year deal at Hampshire before we could even say innings defeat. He'd be there. He'd be signed up, no problem. So the good news for South Africa is that those routes are not going to be available to these guys, but we all know there's plenty of other ones. And actually, that's another thing that I thought watching this test match was it really felt like, because the Future Tours program that's had much discussion in this week sort of came out in and around this first test, didn't it feel like South Africa were the good guys? Like, in a way that not man versus man, 11 versus 11, but as two systems up against each other, the generic cricket fan needs to be pulling for South Africa to do this kind of thing and to pull out this kind of result, because looking at that programme and that what it says about Test cricket and what it says about Test cricket in places that aren't England, Australia and India, the idea that we could look at an attack like that with its skill, its quality, its variety, and think that they're being asked to diminish themselves as a Test nation and or come begging for the chance to be top of the pile, which they are right now in the World Test Championship, just seems... It was a really timely, given the schedule and when it dropped in the calendar, it was a really timely moment for South Africa to come and say, remember, we are really good at this. You should really kind of want to see a bit more of it.
Yeah, to be clear to listeners, I don't think South Africa have got more than a 2-test series in the Future Tours programme, which is scandalous. Now, of course, countries can, if they want to, schedule extra test matches. They're not due to come to England. And given the history of brilliant series between England and South Africa, it's one of those things where if you look at the results since South Africa's readmission, the away side has won more often than the home side, which it shows just how close these two sides are.
And that's the rarity. That's
they are.
That's the golden mark in Test cricket, isn't it? Is winning away from home. And these series really, they put that on the table, which people are desperate to see.
Well, absolutely, and it's sort of heartbreaking, but it is the way, it's the way the money's going, it's the way the game is going. We're kind of lumbered with it, unless we can sort of lobby for South Africa to get more Test matches. But a really great bowling lineup, but their batting has great fragility as well, I think. And had maybe England have won the toss, perhaps, and been bowling on that first day, that could have been not necessarily a different outcome. I think South Africa looked really up for it, and the war of words that took place beforehand was really revealing, wasn't it? Dean Elgar very much talking about how you've got to play the game in a certain way. But I do wonder, Rory, if actually South Africa just play baseball, but they play it with bowlers. Essentially, England focus on their strength, which is their counter-attacking batting. And it didn't come off in this Test match because Root and Bairstow were both victims of absolute pearlers, possibly the ball of the match to get rid of Joe Root in the first innings, one that swung, shown to just clip the edge of a leg stump. And, Johnny Bairstow getting a 93-mile-per-hour full ball when he's just walked to the wicket. These are bowlers, incidentally, just as a sidebar, who hadn't had any warm-up. We talk a lot about how Matthew Potts looked a little bit undercooked and Anderson and Broad were they a bit rusty. Well, the South African bowling lineup, most of them, apart from Jansen, hadn't played in the warm-up game against the Lions. Rabada was, we thought, potentially out of the game with an ankle injury. He bowled 19 of the 45 overs in England's first innings. They were, in theory, undercooked, but their version of baseball is to come at you really hard with their bowlers. England's version of baseball is to come at you really hard with their batters. It seems to me that they're sort of arguing over a misconception.
I think Stokes actually wants to be that bowling captain. I really think that's a big part of his idea. He hasn't quite got the raw materials to necessarily play the way he wants to. I look at Anrich Nortje going at 6 and over at one point or something, and steaming in and grunting and firing hard and nasty. And I think Stokes wants to throw the ball to him. That's what he wants to do, actually. And he is quite a sympathetic bowling captain. I think he. I suppose the new philosophy in terms in the field is there's always going to be slips in, there's always catches in, and he's always asking them to get the thing done. And actually, England bowled them out in 90 overs for 3-2-6. Probably Ben Stokes takes that and thinks we did roughly, give or take, on that pitch what we'd like to do. But he doesn't have Wood and Archer and Stone even perhaps, and I think he's having to manufacture it through bluster and a bit of bluster and blow, because he hasn't got the really, really quick, aggressive, nasty bowlers, and he ends up, bowling those long spells himself, I suppose. But it's interesting, I think, isn't it, to see that we've got these two culture clashes potentially, and in the first innings, England went at 3.66 and over, then South Africa scored at 3.65 and over. It's almost identical. And
it is.
And we talked ourselves into this
to...
idea that Dean Elgar was going to suck the life out of, deflate England's balloon, and they scored at virtually an identical rate over the course of the innings.
Yeah, well, let's move on to Stokes' captaincy, because we'll have more time to cast our eye over South Africa when we preview the next test. But you're dead right. But Stokes' captaincy was what allowed them to get at 3.65 and over, and there was a lot of head scratching in a lot of boxes and in the media centre down below at when you've got two quite scratchy left-handed openers. I mean, Cyril Ervier played a fine knock, a crucial knock in the end, but you did wonder where his runs were going to come from unless there were 5 slips and acres of space outside the off stump to allow him simply to push the ball into that gap. And it was as if Stokes was saying, well, the normal shibboleths that he has worked under, the captains that he has played under. Stokes
talks about little else other than shibboleths, I must say.
Yeah, it's his favourite word. But at 138 for 1, indeed 148 for 2, with South Africa 17 runs behind England, I was looking at a field of 5 slips. Now, Root, Cook, Strauss, pretty much any England captain of the last 20 years would have been bowling dry. They'd have been saying, right, what are you going to do? How are you going to score a run? Stokes is so fidgety. It's almost like he has ADHD. He just, if something hasn't happened that ball, something has to happen to the next ball. Now, I actually think that you're right. I think in the greater scheme of things, you end up at the same place, only a bit quicker. You end up with South Africa bowled up for 326 in 90 overs instead of bowled up for 326 in 120 overs. So not great if you bought a ticket for Saturday, but absolutely fantastic if you're watching. But at the same time, it is baffling. I mean, the 5 slips that allowed Marco Jansen and Keshav Maharaj to go at 10 and over in the last hour before the close. And that was sort of, I mean, England, I think, had lost the game through South Africa's brilliance with the ball. But you did wonder when you're watching that, could you not have restricted them to 2.5 and over in that last hour, bowled a bit more Jack Leach, have the new ball the next day, Anderson and Broad, start of a new day, new ball, pick up your 5 wickets, concede a lead of 100 instead of 160. That would have been the prudent way to have gone. But Stokes cannot bear to be out there without something happening. I was watching that, and there was a change in the field every couple of balls. There was also, Rory, something that was reminiscent of the great TV miniseries Bodyline, which was that I was turning to Vic Marks and saying something, then I looked down, and it looked like someone had just thrown up 11 cricketers onto the outfield, because there was a short, long leg, a long, short leg. There were 3 mid-wickets making an isosceles triangle. There was a backward point. There was a fly second slip. At one point, there was a cordon of fly slips, but that's another matter. Never seen such a thing. And what had happened was that Stokes had basically sort of clapped his hand and gone, right, Harold. And although he was the Harold, in this case, Harold Larwood,
yeah.
And everybody knew where to go. So this isn't just a formless plan. It is a detailed plan in which the fielders know where to go and what the expectation is of it. And I'm struggling to argue with it, even if it looks mad.
Yeah, he wants it. It's like we said even in the previous pod. He wants. Not only does he want, he has. The game has to be advancing, and it can advance against them, because at least then they know what they're up against. They do want to find out the end game, England, don't they? Like they want to. I don't know, they're not going to watch the credits on Netflix, this England team. They skip into the next episode every time, probably halfway through the previous one. They want to find out where the setup is, because that's where this team want results, and they know they're going to lose some in the pursuit of winning them, and they want to find out what it's going to take to win a Test match. And if that means the game gets away from them a little bit, well, as I said, they got South Africa out within 90 overs, and they probably think that part of the game didn't go so badly for them. And we can look at it sort of in the cold light of day, and they, I'm sure, will, because they have lots of people who are paid to do that. But they'll look at it, and I don't think they'll look at that second innings, the South Africa innings, and think that's where the game disappeared from them. They'll say that probably functioned, and clearly people within that could have done better. Some of the bowlers weren't absolutely on it. Stokes did really well, particularly. Some of the bowlers weren't quite where they could have been, but I don't think England will revise that and suddenly come away with the idea that they let the thing go. I don't think they believe that. I think some of the things that had a bit of teeth gnashing and head scratching, they'll just say, well, catch up. That's what we're doing.
Yes, I mean, I do think that there's an incredible inflexibility to what looks like a flexible approach. Insofar as you see a whole load of different plans, but actually they're quite inflexible in the sense that when England did get to that second new ball, and they got there, I'd say fortuitously, Rabada was out to an absolute stunner of a catch by Stuart Broad, which meant that they got that early wicket on the third morning, and we were all going, right, so, in 2 overs' time, Anderson and Broad are going to take the new ball. They're going to nick off the numbers 10 and 11, and away we go. Instead, we had to wait for sort of 50 minutes. We had to wait for Stokes and Potts to get exhausted before Broad and Anderson were allowed. Well, Anderson didn't even come on in the end, did he? But allow Broad to come on, hang it outside the off stump and nick him off. And they might think, exactly in the cold, harsh light of day, we could probably have gone to that plan sooner, like the moment the new ball's available, because we've got 1,209 wickets, many of them with the new ball standing there, currently unused while I'm wanging it in. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You get to a certain place, and which was probably the same place. And actually, it could have been very different in the first passage with the new ball at South Africa, at the beginning of South Africa's innings. Ball beat the outside edge a couple of times, a few absolute pearlers. But I thought Alistair Cook summed it up, really, England's bowling attackers. You want to start a new podcast called Jaffers and Junk, because in between bowling absolute jaffers, for example, Matthew Potts, a bowler who was startling in his accuracy and parsimony in the first 4 games he played, was serving up some pretty horrid pies, and he looked basically rusty. He looked out of the groove, which was an issue it's an issue that English cricket has had for a couple of seasons now because of the way their red ball cricketers are set up to play a whole load of cricket before June. Then they look on it, and then they don't play any red ball cricket until August, and then they're off it. This, incidentally, will not be a problem next year.
But Potts did play a couple of games of the 100 and wasn't. It's like he's maybe just catching up to where his game is. It's we can get onto the makeup of the team for the next game, but it's not as though he went and got everything and changed his lines and lengths to white ball lines and lengths. Because I'm not sure he actually got that part cracked either when he went over to the Northern Superchargers. Another thing though with Stokes' captaincy, I think was worth a little reflection. Is I heard Steve Harmison on Talksport, and he's a real Durham guy. He's happy to go into bat for these guys, and he sounded the alarm about Stokes bowling himself into an early retirement. And
well, he's having to do that, Rory, because he hasn't got he hasn't got somebody who can bowl to his plan, and there's no actual sign of anybody becoming fit in the near future.
Exactly.
I mean, what on earth are they going to do in Pakistan if that's the plan? Because they're going to go to a bouncer barrage after about 25 overs on a flat deck in Rawalpindi, and Stokes is going to have to bowl them all, unless, Mark Wood, Jofra Archer, or somebody of that ilk is back.
Doesn't
and that
seem
was
like it, does
sort
it?
of the stark. Well, that was a stark contrast, wasn't it, between the two sides? Was that extra pace? But look, you've mentioned it. Let's move on to selection. It strikes me that we could break this down into 2 very distinct. Well, 3 actually. I'm going to throw in an extra concern: batting, bowling, and keeping. So let us begin with the batting.
Apart from that, it's quite simple.
Yeah. Well, I preface this by saying that I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are no changes whatsoever. But let's break this down into the 3 parts. You were a staunch defender of Zach Crawley. You made the case for him to stay. Now, I want to make an observation, and I'm conscious that I might be completely wrong. But I was on commentary when Crawley was out LBW, sweeping a straight ball. Don't sweep a straight ball, not just before lunch anyway, from the left arm spinner. Put his size 12s down the pitch, swept across the line, was given out, and he just walked off. Now, I think Alex Lees attempted to have a conversation with him about whether he wanted to walk off or maybe go upstairs. When they did go upstairs, they didn't go upstairs, but when we saw what Hawkeye would have shown, the ball was clipping middle. He would have retained his review. He would have been out, but it was an umpire's call. And he just looked to me, Rory, like a man who actually had enough. Now, I am very, very wary of doing psychobabble because what the hell do I know what's going on inside Crawley's head? But it was unusual because a lot of people plead for the second chance. They're going to Lees going, oh, can you tell me that I can be saved? And I think Lees might have actually been trying to help him save him.
Yeah.
But no, I'm off, I'm done. That's what it felt like.
The last time I remember seeing someone that I had that really, really strong feeling that they were not only ready for the call, but putting themselves out there to receive it was Adam Live. When he finished the last time he walked off for England, he took a really long look around. And I don't think he got many scores, but I just remember thinking, he's ready for this. He ready for this call to come. And if Crawley is there, then it's feels out of character because he appears, out of all these guys who've tried this pretty unhelpful, thankless task really of opening the batting in England, he seems to be able to wear failure pretty lightly. He hasn't previously seemed to get on top of him and worry him. If that's changed, that's kind of the red flag that might persuade England to make that switch. But betting man, I think he walks out to bat at Old Trafford. I think England are.
Yeah.
I think they're not ready, and the fact that they haven't got an opener in the squad is a pretty big tell. Like their poker face isn't great because they haven't retained another opener. So if you're expecting England to go all in on Harry Brook to open on Test debut, it feels like a long shot.
It does feel like a long shot, But the thing is, with this setup and with this desire to be on the front foot the whole time, it's a shot that I think I would give it a sort of 30% chance. The reason being that I think they really do want to get Harry Brook into the lineup somehow, and he can't slot in at 3, 4, 5, or 6 because they've given Pope the extended run. He was top scorer in the first innings with a pretty accomplished 73. Obviously, Root's going nowhere. Obviously, Stokes going nowhere. Obviously, Bairstow's going nowhere. So how do you fit Brook in? Well, there's two ways of doing it. One is he opens, which is an unfamiliar position for him. The other is that Bairstow gets given the gloves in place of Folkes. Now, the issue I'd have with that is that Bairstow's just found a great run of form. He has never scored a Test 100 after keeping wicket. So if England bowl first and he keeps wicket, he's never scored 100. If England bat first, he might score 100 before he's kept wicket, but he certainly won't get one in the second innings. That's what the numbers tell us. Now, numbers are nonsense. We know we've seen a load of them obliterated over the course of this summer. But do you think either of those might be a possibility, that you squeeze Brook in anyway and Folkes just having a little bit of a scratchy run with the bat, and he's also up against very, very quick bowling, and that has looked like it's unsettled him a little bit, even if his glove work's been fine. Yeah,
I mean, well, the appeal of Brook now is overwhelming because he's in this run of form and it's extended. It's been good year last year in various scenarios, formats, and now it's exceptional this year, and he's averaging 107 or whatever, and he's got 140 against this South Africa team, if not the same attack. The idea that you open the batting with him, it's a little bit of a funky plan, and I could have seen them entertain the idea by opening the batting with Harry Brook in the Lions match, because it was apparent that that's where the slot was. We know, as you say, 3 is locked now, 4 is locked, 5 is locked, 6 is locked. So they knew that by their own decisions and by their own selection that the possible vacancy was up at the top. So when they pick that Lions match, they are picking 2 openers. If they had given Harry Brook a shout in a game that was ultimately not a first-class match, not going to count against him, seems strange that they wouldn't have a look at that, because if he goes and gets 100 then it's a walkover decision, isn't it? Then you've given him an outing, and you've got a little bit to work with. To bat him at, I think he batted at 4, did he, in the Lions match? To bat him there and then throw him up and ask him to open, it looks like it's asking for trouble. The idea with Folkes appealing in a different way, but I think England can only get there by demystifying the idea of dropping someone. Because this team
Yes.
hasn't, this setup, Stokes and McCullum, haven't dropped anyone yet, right? They've
I think that's right. Yeah.
basically, Parkinson is the only person, and he was left out of the squad having come in as a concussion replacement. But they haven't dropped anyone yet. Now, they could demystify it and just say, yeah, Folks is still the best wicketkeeper in the world, as Stokes has gone out of his way to say 2 or 3 times. He's done it unprompted. He's one of the players, Folks, that Ben Stokes has picked out to pump his tyres up hard. But he could demystify the whole thing, especially given the fact that we're going to Pakistan and they're going to have to rebalance the team anyway. He could just go, yeah, Ben Folks still the best wicketkeeper in the country, great option. Just fancy restructuring this side for a couple of tests against this South Africa team, and he could suck some of the heat out of it. The more they don't change the team, the more a dropping feels like a cataclysmic event or a final judgment on someone, and moving at this point, and yeah, it doesn't look like Folks had quite a nice start to the summer with the bat. He was quite calm, and he has largely overperformed, I think, against what people expect him to do, because he gets talked down a little bit sometimes. But yeah, getting Harry Brook in is becoming a pressing concern to see, because he's a potential. The way he's coming in with such confidence is becoming an issue that's going to have to be talked around, and they might have to think of some creative ways. If not Brook to open, the 2 lads who opened in the Lions were Sibley and Jennings, and they're not in the squad at the moment. Yeah, but if that's assuming that these guys, Stokes and McCullum, have their fingers in the pie on all levels, you would have to think they are the next 2 they're thinking about. Because if they're not the next 2 they're thinking about, what were they doing there?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, Time's winged chariot is passing quickly, so the last selection I want to give to you. You don't look much like Ed Smith, but try and inhabit the mind of former selector Ed Smith. Or James Taylor, either. I don't mind. Okay. Well, because no one knows who the selectors are at the moment. It could actually be you, for all I know. So, the bowling. Now, the issue with the bowling was clear. We've discussed it already. It lacks pace. It has done. There's a perennial question mark over Anderson and Broad, but I think the biggest concern was Matthew Potts, simply because he had such a great start to his Test career, and it was founded on the great, noble, eternal verities of line and length, parsimony, giving nothing away, natural variation, nipping the odd one back, a little bit more bounce than you'd expect. Nearly all of that was missing, and I don't blame the lad for it at all. I think the lack of cricket before that, he seems to me a bowler who needs to be bowling, needs to be grooved. But waiting in the wings is last year's sensation. If Matt Potts has been this year's revelation, then last year's revelation, to those who hadn't seen much of him, is Ollie Robinson. Now, Ollie Robinson, I promise you, I don't know if you saw him at all in the Lions game, but he's looking a lot trimmer. He's looking a lot fitter. Mm-hmm. It looks like he'll have his nip back, and he is an incredibly effective bowler. I mean, his numbers are ridiculous, and they were terrific in Test cricket last year. It doesn't give England any extra pace. If anything, it would slow the pace down if he came in for Potts. But it strikes me that they do need him, only I don't know how he quite fits in to Stokes' bowling plans, the ones that we've just talked about. So discuss, how do we get Ollie Robinson in the team? Is it desirable?
It probably is desirable, yeah. And again, it comes down to being able to change the team without feeling like it's a drama. So they should be able to switch Broad for Robinson, or they should be able to switch Potts for Robinson and not have it be an anchor around their leg, weighing them down and discussion, because back-to-back-to-back tests are now the thing. That's what England are going to do. So their bowling attack will have to change, and it's not going to be the old story of batsmen fail, bowlers pay. Because the bowling changes are going to have to be just pragmatic decisions to look after the group, freshen them up, and stop them joining the injury list. So a bowling change in the middle of a 3-match series isn't too dramatic, albeit the loads weren't huge in this Test match for England because they only bowled 1 innings. But Robinson, if he has impressed them with his outlook to his conditioning, to his work, and he's done what is asked on that front, his bowling gets him in the team. That's fine. and you could look at Potts and Broad and say which one of those is going to go. And you could go either way with that, because Potts did look a little off, and he hasn't been quite right. He had that strange match at Durham as well in the one-day series where he bowled 4 overs and sort of gave in to the 38-degree heat and wasn't able to come back out. And then his 100 didn't go quite as well as it might have. So you could pull him out and let him have just a bit of time away, and by time I mean a week. But equally, Broad could be the one, because it might be that you want to give Ollie Robinson the new ball. If you want him to succeed, and he could bowl to Ben Stokes' plans, because he actually is going to thrive from having a lot of catches behind the wicket and tossing it up and asking people to drive him. So it's not about... He doesn't have to bowl bouncers and show Ben Stokes that he can hit someone on the head. What he's got to do is show Ben Stokes, and it goes back to what we were chatting about just a few minutes ago. He's got to show Ben Stokes he can get the game moving. And he can get the game moving with the new ball, pitching it up and getting the slips in play.
Yep, very concise. I think I entirely agree with you, Rory, much to my great disappointment. We're going to break off here now, because we'll be back. We'll be back to preview the second test, either in person together. Maybe. We might even manage to do that, because you'll be up in Manchester, won't you?
I will.
Yes, we shall be reunited.
And we have a Ben Stokes documentary coming up, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well.
Oh, yes. I've got to get into that. But from Rory Dollard, the chief, the big noise at PA, Press Association, and me, Daniel Norcross, for this edition of England Cricket on 99.94, it is goodbye.